Sorry, because I was like, yeah, just ask if you can, some people super.
Yeah, and then after, so don't forget to ask. I mean, I'll share with Darren so we can finish what I
Yeah.
I was like, hey, keep it.
Why you weren't to serve at 7 a.m.
Exactly, right, not right. Okay, ready?
Oh, this? Oh.
So we're going to start. Good evening and welcome. Welcome to the BCA Center and to the Human Impact Contemporary Art and the Environment exhibition and to this conversation this evening. Thank you to our audience for coming out, being with us, and to our online audience. It's a great pleasure. This session is recorded and will be available in a few days on our website. So if you have friends who couldn't make it tonight or you want to share it with your children or, just get it out in the world. So this exhibition has brought together so many different partners and friends and colleagues because I think these issues affect all of our lives. They affect our identities, our families, our larger community. And artists are perpetually interested in this area of thought. And there's so many different approaches, so many questions that are raised, and at different times, different answers. We are so fortunate to have such talented and thoughtful artists in this exhibition and with us tonight. We have 4 panelists this evening. Renée Greenlee, Nicolei Buendia Gupit, Jennifer Green, and Dr. Declan McCabe. Would you take a few minutes, introduce yourself, and talk a little bit about, why this panel, why you're here, why is this important? Start with you, Renée.
My name is Renée Greenlee, and I'm an artist in Huntington, Vermont. So not far from here, and most of my work has been concerning the watershed. And out of that project is sort of where this work stemmed, the state of repair, which is easily up there. So that's nice. Thank you for the assist. And so that work really began with an idea of, I have a lot of material from those past projects of making cyanotypes of water in the watershed, both in Vermont and then outside of the state of Vermont. I've sort of been growing that project to be more global in scope. But with these pieces, what I was really curious to see was what would happen if I buried them and how long would it take for them to decompose. And so once I unearthed the silk after being buried for several months, I saw that the paths of decomposition really represented also the paths of water. And I think that just really got me thinking about this idea of constantly being in a state of repair, hence the title. And also the reason why I'm on this panel is also to discuss those ideas around being in a constant state of repair, because I think we're all aware of the situation that we find ourselves in globally on so many different levels and spheres of social, political, environmental, etc. And so this work was really my way of trying to enter into that conversation and raising that question of what it means to be in a state of repair and how sometimes those small acts, those small stitches can go a long way, joining that conversation of mending and what that looks like in our community.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicolei Buendia Gupit, and I'm an assistant professor of art at University of Vermont here in Burlington. My guess is why I was invited to this panel or this exhibition in particular. I had spent 1 year right after graduating from my graduate program in Michigan State University. I lived in the Philippines on a Fulbright. So I was a Fulbright researcher studying climate change in the Philippines. And in particular, I was looking at the impact of climate change on communities, coastal communities in the Philippines. And the output of my research, because I'm a visual artist, was sculptures and installations, and one of which is the one that's downstairs, which I made in 2023. But then I revisited and reinterpreted for this exhibition to think about how it relates to the new context here in Vermont.
Great, thanks, Nicolei. Doreen's going to have to tell me why I'm here, but I can take a guess. My name is Jennifer Green, and I'm the Director of Sustainability for the city, where our goal, here's my tagline, is to reduce and eventually eliminate fossil fuel usage in the building sector and ground transportation sector. We know those are the two pieces of the pie that are most responsible for greenhouse gases. And so I spend my time working on mitigation. And I think I'm here because I want to share the value of art in expressing concern and as an opportunity to bring us together and to have these bigger conversations. And I guess we'll talk more about that soon.
Yeah, and you were incredibly moved by this work. And I think that alone makes you an important person on the panel, but also just having within the city of Burlington someone who is totally engaged in this conversation and brings it out to the larger community is really important for all of us. So thank you.
And which one am I using? This one?
Oh, sorry,
So,
you don't need that.
Well,
We're sharing.
with a stereo, I can go back and forth. So I'm Declan McCabe. I'm a biologist at St. Michael's College. And I'm here, I did the traditional path that academics do and, write those obscure papers for 12 of my colleagues. And I transitioned in the latter half of my career to writing pieces for the newspapers aimed at broader audiences. So communicating environmental messages to bright people, but in jargon-free language. And I've had a lot of fun doing that. And every time I write one, an artist does a beautiful piece that goes with it. And so it's like opening a Christmas present because I don't influence the art other than writing the piece. And so I've had a lot of fun with that interaction. And the other fun thing I've been doing is I manage the natural area for St. Mike's. And in the process, we try to bring artists in. And Brian Collier is the colleague I mostly interact with. He does environmental art. And he brought in Nancy Milliken and various other people to do installations on site. And the one piece that I was really impressed by, it was clay blocks designed to disintegrate into the landscape. And each one formed a piece of poetry by the poet laureate for the state. And it was just cool. You had to walk about a mile to get the entire poem. And then over time it disappeared. And so, the interactions with artists have been fun, and to see the stuff that Brian's students do and the hopeful messages that come from his art and his students' art. I think that's my connection, and maybe that's why I'm here.
I think so. I think so. Thank you. So let's start with the questions, and then we'll go to question and answers from the audience and from our guests online. So why does this exhibition matter? Renee, you want to start?
Sure. The more that I think about this question, which has definitely been a preoccupation, when you think about all the things that are going on in the world, then, why? Like, why are we making art? It feels like a shot in the dark sometimes. But I think that one of the things that art can do, especially whenever you're in a state of overwhelm, and if you think about that, being in that state, usually your vision narrows, you're not really able to see a bigger picture. You just feel like a little out of control of your setting or your surroundings. And I think what art can do, and I know that has done for me, is it's a way of focusing. And it's a way of kind of bringing my mind into a specific state of concentration so that I'm not so overwhelmed by the state of things that are happening, things that I don't have control over. And so then ideally, then that work sort of becomes a point of conversation and a way of making connection. And so it goes beyond my own experience of making the work, and then it goes into the community. And so in that way, it sort of strengthens the fabric of community. And I think that that is what matters now more than, I guess, it's always been important, but it does feel intense at the moment. And so it's good, I think, for us to strengthen those ties between one another so that whenever you are hit with that sense of overwhelm or you're not sure what to do, there's always a conversation that you can enter into. And so as an artist, I feel like that's my main way of contributing to that idea. So.
I think Renee said it really well. I was just thinking about this idea of shared grief. And I think art offers that opportunity, you know, especially downstairs when we're looking around. And I think we can come together around that theme. I think being able to talk about it, I think actually alleviates some of the stress, and we can't be completely stressed out if we're going to tackle some of the challenges. And so I appreciate that, like the community aspect that Renee mentioned. I would add, as part of those dialogues and conversations that art offers, is an opportunity to sort of share in dismay together, and maybe it'll dissipate a little bit when we can do that in conversation.
Yeah, I think that just to add a little bit to that idea of ecological grief in particular, I think that this is one of the ways to come around that and sort of give permission to allowing the audience to feel that sense of grief, and also try to couple that with a little bit of hope, right? Because we're always trying to balance usually those two really difficult things of being in this world, that it is beautiful and it's also horrible at the same time. And so how do we navigate that? And I think that connection of grief and allowing spaces for that is really important as we move forward.
And I also think the exhibit is important in terms of drawing people into environmental issues. There's different ways that people are going to learn about plastics in the environment, for example. So my students can go and do a beach cleanup. We did a beach cleanup on the Maharis on the Dingle Peninsula one time. And so those students know that most of the plastic washing in is actually of fishing origin. Students who did a cleanup in our own floodplain would recognize the plastics, has been more familiar with Nicolei's work in terms of what washes off the landscape and hopscotches on down the river with each flood. But I think some people are going to be drawn in to an art exhibit that'll be a different population than the folks who are going to show up with their work gloves, or it might overlap, I don't know. But there's different ways to get people aware, and art is an excellent way to draw people in and give a positive message and explain that we can do things better.
Yeah, I might just be repeating what my three fellow panelists are saying, but essentially the way that I view it is that art, as opposed to, I think, the hard sciences, it allows us to see something and have kind of, it allows many interpretations, right? So like, for example, in my work that's being exhibited right now, in the age of abundant scarcity, I've heard people's responses to it in that are actually different from the way that I interpret it myself. And I invite that, you know, I like that aspect of visual arts, that it allows for many different interpretations. And I think one thing about the issue of climate change that's very difficult is that because of that ecological grief that we were talking about, that it's kind of debilitating. It makes us feel like we can't do anything. But I think art allows us to see and feel hope, and it can lead to action.
So turning this a little bit to, I'm going to ask questions of the artist and then others, but to the artist, is beauty an intentional outcome that is important for you?
Yes, it is for me. I think of it as an invitation. So when something is beautiful, I think we're drawn to that in some sense. You feel enamored by it at first. You know, you want to get a little bit closer. You want to maybe then, as you get closer to the piece, I think in regards to the work of State of Repair, I think it takes a minute and you have to sort of read the text that goes along with it to understand that what's happening in that piece is that, you know, the water is part of what makes it beautiful in the cyanotype process and all of that. But then also what makes it beautiful is the decomposition and then the sort of embroidering along the lines of decomposition. So in that way, I think decay is not something that we often look at and think of like, oh, that's a beautiful thing that is falling apart. We usually are like, no, let's fix it. Let's put it back together, or try to delay it in some way. But I think with my work, what I am really interested in is this idea of decay and how it can be beautiful. This idea of going back to the earth can be a really precious and momentous thing, not only with our work, but with our bodies. And I think we're constantly in a state of, moving in that direction. And so rather than fight it, what happens when we embrace it? But I think that you have to, at least for me, in my perspective, that beauty of the piece allows for you to enter in, and then you can read, and then you can see that, oh, this is decomposing. And it is, I can't, once that process starts, you can't really stop it. So it's happening, even if it's incremental, even if we can't really see it in the naked eye. So I think that that's what beauty allows for me, is sort of a place of entry. And then you can have more of a conversation about that and see, like what Nicolei was saying about inviting that other perspective, and even having conversations with other people about the work and seeing how they see it differently than I do. That benefits me, and it opens up my perspective, my perception, in a way that wouldn't if I had just kept it close to my heart and not really shared it. So I think that that's part of why it's important for me.
Nicolei?
It's a challenging question to answer because beauty, I guess especially growing up.
We could shut them all. Yeah.
Oh, it's all my fault. Okay. Happy to help. Well, maybe it's her fault.
Maybe.
Yeah. Hello there. I'll try not to do it again.
I think we're good.
Are we good? Okay.
Go ahead.
That was scary. But maybe fitting to the topic. So basically, growing up, the word beauty is kind of a not a very comfortable thing. I wasn't very comfortable with the word beauty because it kind of, growing up in LA in particular, it has kind of superficial aspect to it. Like how perceptions of how young women should look. For example. But one thing that really changed my mind about beauty as a concept was a book that I read by Mimi Thien Nguyen. She's a Vietnamese writer, and her writing is actually talking about an expansive definition of beauty in thinking about ecological crisis, and also all forms of crisis like war, for example, and how beauty is what allows us to see what life is worth living. And so, like, for example, she talks about like images of refugees in war-torn places, and how these images that we see on social media feeds, right, they inspire us to see life in places of hardship. And also, she had another example was like another example in the book was like these barbers who would offer free haircuts to homeless folks in LA, and how that gave them hope, just to feel a sense of a beauty. And so I think in my artwork, I like that, just exactly how Renee mentioned, it's kind of a way to invite people to see my work, or to like kind of be attracted to my work. But I don't think of it as a kind of end all be all of the actual work. I'm more drawn to like the concept and the kind of ideas I want to express in my work.
Yeah. And I would add too, I think with Nicolei's work, whenever you're looking at that light and that color that's emanating from the pieces, that I think those are elements of beauty as well, that sort of draw you in. And then you realize this idea of like abundance in the age of, or what is it, scarcity in the age of abundance, is this sort of juxtaposition of these two things. Like, so the light and the color are drawing you in, and then you see like the texture and the way that it moves throughout, you know, the piece, that the movement of what appears to be water but isn't water. And so there's so many ways of like using that light, using color, using texture, like those things that we're sort of drawn to, almost like, you know, magpies, how magpies are drawn to beautiful things. And we sort of, I think we're like that as human beings. We want to be drawn in. And so art is a way of doing that. You can also have art in other ways that's, you know, the total opposite of that. And that can draw you in through like shock and, you know, and create like a different sensibility. So it's not to say that one is more valuable than the other, but I think it is like one of the ways that you can do to sort of be part of the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So Jennifer and Declan, I'll take it from a little bit of a different angle. How do you feel about the use of beauty to portray difficult subject matter? And do you see it as dangerous or as an asset?
It's totally an asset. To me, I mean, if it's coming from the heart, if art's coming from the heart, it has to be an asset. And because it's an authentic way to communicate. I don't know. What else do you want to say about Declan? I would say it's an asset. I mean, we all have our roles to play, and whether you're creating art and drawing people into conversation, which means either inspires action or alleviates a sense of grief, that's good. If you're sitting at a desk, you know, trying to promote EV ridership and public transportation, that's good too. I mean, I think we all have our pieces. There's a large puzzle, and there are many pieces, and we all have pieces to play in that conglomeration of actions.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that is really what you're asking, Doreen, but that's how I'm interpreting your question.
I mean, Declan, go ahead.
Your interpretation is what counts, right? That's why you're here. I think if beauty draws a person into a topic, and an important topic, then it serves the topic as well as serving, you know, if it's an environmental cause and a piece of art draws you in, that's a good thing, you know. And you know, in my training, we learned about the RLC shrinking and disappearing, right? And you would think as a water biologist, I would have been more aware of the same thing happening to the Great Salt Lake, but I wasn't until I looked at this exhibit and I was like, wow, the stuff we were using as a textbook example 20 years ago, and blaming the Soviet Union for drying up the lake, we're doing the same thing to our Salt Lake. And so, you know, the beauty of those photographs drew me into that exhibit. And now I know something I didn't know before. So, you know, I think beauty serves all of us, and we need beauty in our lives no matter what. And if it brings you into a cause, even if it's a scary cause, bring it on. You know, I mean, you look at a snowfall and you worry about slipping into the ditch, but then you look at a snowflake and it's incredible. You know, get a microscope, folks. Good.
Lovely, lovely. So the third question. In a world saturated with data about environmental impact, what does art uniquely change about how you feel and how you act? You can go in any order, just.
Sure. I think, well, perhaps maybe that is the aspect of art that sometimes art can reach you at an emotional level in a way that data can't. And I think maybe that's sort of the reason for having that. I think it's more of a both and type idea, because you can look at something and know it's beautiful or be drawn in by it. But then there is sort of the what's next piece. And I think data can speak to that, because then, like what Declan was saying, once you know something, once you have a little bit more information, then perhaps you can go about the idea or the impetus to actually change behavior. And I think that's sort of like in the work that I do around the watershed and making the cyanotypes, one of the things that I often notice are these fractal patterns. The fractals are always patterns that are constantly repeating in nature. And so you can then sort of extrapolate that idea, which Adrienne Murray Brown does really well in some of her work, about like that's also true within society. And so once you have an idea, you can notice a pattern, then, and which is usually, those patterns are usually relayed to us by data whenever we're talking about like bigger societal issues or like big environmental issues, then you can look at that data and say like, oh, okay, that's really having an impact. So what do we do? Like, is there a course correction here? So I think it's kind of a both and thinking about data and art, science and art. I think these things are just really intertwined.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead? Yeah, I'm thinking in particular about Rebecca Tuck's work downstairs, which takes the plastic from around Massachusetts and weaves them into beautiful, beautiful pieces. And I'm thinking their story, it's a way to tell a story.
Mm.
And I'm thinking about in my work, you know, I work at the Burlington Electric Department. I'm in the thick of like engineering world and data. And we know that talking about net zero energy and having that be real for people is so much more than sort of the numbers, that we need to be better at telling stories about what we're doing. So I'll just sort of make a pitch. This is really like one of my missions. Like, we can't just be showing graphs and expect people to get excited about them. So we have a podcast, you know, where we invite community members in and we ask them to tell their stories about whatever it is they might be doing. So it could be somebody, you've seen those bike walk, the trolleys that people use now to grocery shop, and the important role. Do you have one? Or good for you. Well, the important role that they provide in letting people maybe ease in public transport, using public transport. And maybe you're getting, you know, you're walking and getting your exercise. You don't have to get in the car. Anyway, there's stories behind all the actions that people are taking that are really important to communicate to folks, in addition to all the data we produce. And so just thinking about art as another way to tell story, not only to, you know, to express what you're feeling, but also to share with others. Back to sort of this idea of then creating conversation and maybe alleviating stress and spurring change.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I mean, obviously, when I'm teaching my courses, a lot of it is data driven, and that's the audience that I need to address. But I also recognize that I'm in a liberal arts college, and that some of those students who came in the door and decided they were going to be pre-meds because sometimes mom or dad said you're going to be pre-med, they find poetry or they find visual art. And so, like when I talk about fossilization and bogs, for example, there's a poem I bring in by Seamus Heaney about the bogman, and I've got this spectacular photograph of the bogman that he wrote about. And you know, I know there's some of those students going out the door and thinking I need to take an English class, you know, and I hope that's true. But I think art moves people in different ways. I'm, you know, full respect for data. We need data. I'm not going to argue against data, but you know, you got to make the person out there in that seat comfortable, knowing that their artistic sensibility has value also, and maybe maybe they needed to be a poet, and maybe they shouldn't be pre-meds. So, no disrespect.
Leave that judgment for another day.
You know, I'm happy for our pre-meds. You know, we and they get into medical school successfully. It's all wonderful, but you know, many of them change majors, and I like to see that. And art is a way to move them in a different direction.
And to just expand on what Jen was saying earlier about storytelling, so I'll just give a short anecdote. So in addition to the project that's downstairs, in the age of abundant scarcity, I've been going back to the Philippines to exhibit artwork, but also to see my family. That's where both my parents live. And one of the projects that I did, in addition to the one downstairs, is a video project where I interviewed fisher folk. And also, my family lives by a fish port, and there's a market. So I also interviewed folks who sell fish at the fish market. And so basically in my work, I want to question who do we view as the experts of this, you know, data of climate change. And I knew because I come from a family of fishermen, fisher folks. And I know that they know for a fact that climate change is real. And so I interviewed them and I recorded their audio, and they tell, you know, the exact thing that we all know for a fact, you know, because of data, but they say it, you know, it's the prices of fish are going up. they need to fish farther out because the availability of fish near the shore is dwindling, and the types of fish, it's different from years ago, and they know for a fact that it's because of the warming of the ocean, because of climate change. And I was really fascinated that by the fact that they use the word climate change, the phrase climate change, to refer to what's happening with the ocean, and they've known it for decades. And so, so I think putting specific voices at the forefront through art is one way to tell a story about climate change, and say something about it's a way for me to say like whose voices are being left out by data.
Mm-hmm. And I think somehow the deeper you go into data and its impact, there's a need to sort of do an about reverse to figure out a way that you take that data to where it needs to go. Like what it creates an emotional response. And then what sense do you use of the many senses of how this is expressed? And obviously in the work downstairs, there's a lot of different approaches to what the story is that's being told. And there's so much behind each piece. And getting to these conversations tonight and other talks with artists, you realize how important that journey is. That is from the beginning of the creation of that work to putting it out and then offering it to a community. So yeah, thank you. So the last question is, what about this exhibition gives you hope?
I feel like I should have moved my chair. Being first in line. I've been thinking a lot about that word too, because I feel like it's like hope, love, those words, tend to get overused and then they sort of lose their meaning. And so how do you retain meaning? How do you imbue it with the meaning that it actually has? Because hope is really this idea of a possibility. And I don't want to give up on the idea of possibility. And I know that it might not always be probable, but it could be possible. Things could change for the better, even if there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that we're moving in a difficult direction. I think there still is the possibility of course correction. And I think that I get a lot of hope from just noticing the people around me and the work that they're doing and the contributions that they're making to community. I think even just with the folks that are in this room and on this panel, each of you plays a role in sort of facilitating hope in whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that can be just showing kindness to another person that might not expect it, or by, creating ways of connecting with students, as, both Declan and Nicolei do. And then also in connecting with BED and thinking about what an incredible opportunity that is for the city to try to change course, build a better city, taking less from the earth. I think those are all ways of like creating hope. And I think that we can all do it in small ways or in big ways. It depends on so many factors, but I think that we're all doing it. At least that's what I think. That's what I hope for anyway. Yeah.
Another hard, challenging question. So I think I'm going to say ditto again to Renée's answer. But I guess, something to add on to that is, I like what Renée said about like kindness towards each other. But I think also in addition to kindness to each other, but I think we need to be kind to other beings, not only humans, to, everything that is around us. Because thinking back to, I'm going to drop another reference, Timothy Morton. He's a writer, actually, I think English professor at Rice University. He wrote Hyperobjects, but he's such an influential thinker thinking about ecology and the human impact on climate change, and he talks about how why we need hope is because the tendency usually for climate activists is to say something about how that kind of like a, I told you so, or that we should feel upset about climate change, and the problem with that is that it doesn't lead to action. So the better approach is to kindness, and seeing the kind of interconnectedness between us as humans and also every other being, that because we are interconnected, and so what gives me hope in this exhibition in particular is that we're all kind of like-minded, and we are all excited about although it is a sad topic, but at least we all are doing something and kind of starting the conversation. So I think it leads me to this hopeful feeling.
That was so well said. I think I would say that it's the creative process that gives me hope. And the fact that human beings, even despite what's going on, still feel this drive to create. I mean, that's really when we're in trouble, right? When we stop feeling the need to do that because we feel so destitute. So I find there's hope just in the creative process and what's displayed downstairs. And the fact that an exhibition like this would bring us all together. I mean, that feels hopeful in and of itself. When we're separated and isolated and not coming together in conversation around the messages that artists have to share, I think that'd be a bad place. Let's hope we don't go there.
Yeah.
And we won't.
Yeah.
Won't.
I mean, it's so fabulous. One of the great pleasures of working in this building is we get to hear a lot of conversations as people are coming into the exhibition, the school groups that come and community members and UVM classes, et cetera. And the conversations are amazing. And so ultimately, an artist's work in some way is done when the piece is finished, and then you give it to the world, and it's what takes place with that object that really becomes so critical. And the joy in those conversations, the difficulty, the imagination that comes out, some of the kids lying on the floor looking at some of the pieces and being asked to use their imagination, and what they come forth with is priceless. So, but Declan, I didn't give you a chance to respond.
Oh, just this community that has come together gives me hope. There's a quote from Aldo Leopold, and I'll butcher it, I'm sure, but essentially he says ecologists live in a world of wounds, and living in a wounded world is not where I want to be. And so many years ago, I decided that's not where I want to be. And myself and Trevi and Stanger, who I work with, we were walking across a plowed field at work one time, and Trevi said, "Wow, you could plant trees here." And this is 2016, 17, something like that. And he started planting trees with students, and he got them from Branch Out Burlington. We got a representative here today, and they donate trees to us every year. We stick them in the ground, and they grow. Mm-hmm. And some of those trees you can now look up at. Mm-hmm. And, you don't need to live in the world of wounds. There's something you can do about it. And you've got these people in the room here today. They came here for artistic reasons, or they came here for environmental reasons. But together, we've all learned something about the environment, and that there's something we can do. There's a lot we can do. And I shared with you right at the very beginning, a friend of mine texted me photographs of her brand new grandchildren, two twins that were born today. If you can't have hope, with those little kids coming into the planet, what are you going to do, right? So I think this whole thing gives me hope, and the fact that we have environmental artists doing this, they'll reach a far bigger audience than the other thing I mentioned at the beginning, which is obscure scientific papers for 10 people, right? Fair enough. I mean, there's value to that too, but I think there's a much broader impact for a moving piece of art. So thank you, artists.
Yeah. So turning to our audience for questions, and then Jackie will take some from online as well. Sarah's here to bring the mic around. You can just raise your hand and. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I am running the Zoom, and we have one of our human impact artists on the Zoom who has a question. To Renee and Nicolei, do you see your work as offering repair or more as witnessing?
Oh, that's such a good question. I could see both. I think that my work, I guess, as I stated in the title, State of Repair, is about repair, but it is also about witnessing the decay. And so I think that it's like sort of it's a both and. I usually go there, the both and. Like it's this and it's that. I don't know how to be one distinct way. I like the gray area. But I think too, your work too, the idea of witnessing and what you've witnessed in the Philippines and the stories that you're sharing through that work, that is, you know, those bottles are also, those are witnesses too. So yeah, what do you think? I'm asking you both.
I want to say witnessing. I mean, I guess I didn't share in great detail about the work downstairs, so I'll share now. So in the age of abundant scarcity, I originally made in 2023 in response to a kind of paradoxical phenomenon that I observed, which is very apparent in the Philippines, which is that there's an abundance of water, right? It's an archipelago, you know, over 7,000 islands. There's flooding and typhoons, right? So a lot of water, and yet people don't have enough water to drink. And so I wanted to make a work that kind of sat with that, you know, discrepancy. And so I was there on the Fulbright for a year, and then I had, while there, I gathered the waste in the river that was near me, and I encapsulated it in the resin sculptures that are shaped like water bottles. So I wanted it to reflect, you know, that duality of like not enough water, but too much water. But also pollution and the fact that this is not only an issue in the Philippines. This is actually, in fact, an issue here in Vermont that I think many people don't know, especially maybe outside of Vermont. You know, people come to Vermont thinking it's a climate haven, but in reality, you know, there were the 100-year floods have become more frequent here. You know, Lake Champlain is reaching historical lows, and people are also, their wells are drying up. And so there is abundance of water, right, through snow, and also other forms of water, right, flooding in Montpelier, for example. But then there's also scarcity. So this is not unique to the Philippines. It's also here and also many places in the world. So yeah, so I view the work as being witness to these phenomena, and I think through witnessing we're able to see possible solutions, at least, you know, to spark conversation about them.
Thank you. Jackie, you have another question or want to move here?
So the New York Times about a month ago had an editorial saying that art is truth. Good art is truth. You know, the poets say that too. Beauty is truth. Truth, beauty. So, you know, one thing I've been thinking about that for the last month, and there was this incident where in the 19th century, a guy got a railroad spike in his head.
Phineas Gage.
Yeah, Vermont.
Yeah, from Vermont.
Nice.
And what he lost was his emotion, and he lost the ability to make decisions. So we make decisions out of our emotions, And when you say beauty, I think you're just saying that there's an emotional reaction to your work, and your art allows us to make decisions and find truth. What do you think about that?
Beautifully said.
I was recently thinking about this, and I think in sort of an age of artificial intelligence, what is really the distinguishing factor between humans and intelligence, humans and other beings. And one of the things that I came across was this idea that that we're able to ask questions. And that's an uncommon thing. That's not something that really happens within other species groups. Even, I think the case in point was the gorilla that learned 100 different phrases and questions that was taught, but they could answer them, but they couldn't form a question. And so I think in that too, like if you'll notice, if you ever go and use AI, they will always tout how accurate it is, but that little part that is not accurate is remarkable. It adds up to quite a bit. And so I think that sort of also gets at this question of truth and like, how are we able to discern truth? I think that's also like a very human thing. And we do that through asking questions. And so I think the work that I do and the work that I really enjoy engaging with is work that really tries to get to those questions and tries to get to like the deeper meaning of how and why we're here.
Such a great answer. All right, I'm going to go at it at a very different angle, maybe very kind of all over the place, but let's see where I go. So basically, the way I view emotions is, like what's happening right now with climate change, with the Anthropocene. It comes from the Enlightenment, and it's kind of like, through industrialization and just over extraction of resources on Earth, we've led ourselves to this place. And I think it was that kind of splitting between our idea of like mind and body, or emotion and reason. And I think reason, if we try to rationalize climate change, we won't get to a point where we can answer the issue at hand. Because I think for me, as an artist, but also just the way that I view the solution to climate change is love. And so it's through feeling, through emotion. And so it's like loving, it's exactly what we were saying earlier about like being kind to other beings, loving other beings. And so, and not for any reason, not for kind of a rational reason. And so, so that's my take on this question is, emotion. And I mean, it makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you.
Yeah, that's tough to beat. I think you nailed it.
I think the seeing the beauty and feeling an emotion for other things allows us to protect them. And I think that's just to bounce off what you said. I look down a microscope at a bug and I feel that. I'm like, wow, that thing is cool. I know not everybody sees that, and I know it's in the eye of the beholder. But that's like, wow, I want to make a better place for those things. That's, I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, the reason got us into this mess, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to get us out. It's going to have to be. We got to love.
Yeah.
We got to love. And we didn't talk a lot about. Well, we started talking about equity and accessibility, and that's all part of the conversation too. Making sure that we're giving everybody a platform to express and to share and to ensure that we're listening to the storytellers, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy. Exactly.
Okay, another question here in the front.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Well,
Oh,
it's way too loud. My name's Kara, and I'm so glad I came tonight, and I regret only that I didn't spend more time downstairs first checking out the exhibition, and I will do that after if it's still open. I got drawn in immediately with the discussion. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Oh, Renee.
Renee, where you were talking about the state of repair and you know, the feeling of overwhelm that all of us experience either day to day or week to week, whether it be from the news or from our own jobs, roles in the family, whatever it might be. And I've been thinking a lot about neuroplasticity and how the brain is able to reformulate neural pathways and heal itself, and how what role that art plays in that game. And I happen to be part of a group called the Howard Center Arts Collective, and that's been a really big part of my life for about a decade. And our artists all grapple with all kinds of mental health challenges and substance use challenges. And art is the vehicle for healing and connection with other artists, but also with the world around us. And so I've been thinking about all of you and your art and your work and your role here, and wondering, in addition to communicating the importance of climate change, and I love the piece on decay and the state of repair. That really kind of stimulates my thinking. But I've been also wondering how much of your work, how much of your creative processes are you working something out for yourselves, or you healing something in yourself, or sitting at a table in order to feel that presence of whatever it is you're working with, and do something with your hands that puts you in a well, for me anyway, as an artist, I make art because I need to feel the materials in my hands, and it brings me to a peaceful place. And so sometimes I might have a mission or a theme in mind, but mostly I do it to feel something. And I'm just wondering if you could address that aspect of creating art.
I think I create usually with a sense, like I usually have a specific idea in mind whenever I'm trying to create. It helps for me to have a goal to work towards. I find that to be really satisfying. And so sometimes it's whenever I don't have that, that's whenever I can start to feel like a little undone, where I'm like, oh, what are we working towards? What are we doing? And so art is definitely a way for me to process I find like the sort of the current circumstances that we're in. And I would say, like, for example, like with the flooding of 23, 24, and then again in 25 in the Northeast Kingdom, where I am in Huntington, the floods in 23 and 24 were, really significant. And I just found myself, I think, making as a way of processing all of the damage. And I had started out this whole series of making work about water and the watershed more as like a point of connection to myself and the landscape, and trying to deepen that understanding. But then whenever I saw the just sort of abject destruction that water brought, it just really, changed my perspective of like, not everybody's going to see your work in that way. People are going to hear rain and they're going to feel, anxious, and how can you then make work that also addresses that component? And I think that's sort of also part of where state of repair comes from, is that component of wanting to be able to heal something, or wanting to be able to do something and not being quite sure what it is that I need to do. And I can find it in different aspects of my life through volunteer work and some other things that I do that are very like, community centered and very specific to flood recovery, especially. But the work is sort of like, it allows me to sort of work through those ideas, to get in kind of that state of just like, I'm not sure what to do. And so I'm going to make all of these really tiny little stitches and hope that at the end of this, like, I can figure out something that's beyond this work, but that's also productive for community. So it's definitely a work in progress and a way of processing for me.
Any other panelists want to respond? Yeah.
Really good at this. I got answers to some questions. So, I guess for me, I also work very materially. The work that I do outside of resin work, which is the material I use downstairs, is paper making. So I make paper from scratch, usually from like found fibers like abaca, which is a banana plant fiber. But I guess when you're asking that question, the thing that came to mind is like, the danger of like being kind of an environmental artist or an artist working around climate change is like kind of aestheticizing something that's kind of a very apparent crisis. And I guess and it's something that I grapple with in the studio. Like, how do I make it like that I'm, that this is really an important topic, but I don't want it just to sit in the gallery, So what I do is I have conversations with communities. Like, for example, when I did work with the coastal communities in the Philippines, it was really important for me to know their perspectives and how it impacts. Of course, it's like my family's perspectives, right? Like my family back in the Philippines. But so I always want to ground my work on these stories and the fact that climate change impacts people unevenly, and it like when we think about Hurricane Katrina, it was like Black and brown folks who were impacted predominantly, and then same with typhoons in the global South, right? These are impacting mainly based on class and race, predominantly. So I think I always want to be mindful of the way that I create art in what spaces, right? BCA is a nonprofit gallery, and then I try to make connections with arts communities who are working with, like, for example, fisher folk. I've done workshops with them. One of which we made clay fish by hand, and then we talked through making with clay, like air dry clay, talking about their stories, like fish stories, but also climate stories.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Can go. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here and doing this. My question, you mentioned it, Renee, and it's something that's on my mind, but so it's sort of adjacent, but we're talking about the environment and creativity, and so this sort of goes along with all of that. But my question's about AI and the role of AI in as destructive or harmful or helpful in creating new processes and systems, and how that both affects the environment, the art world, and just your thoughts on all of that. And this is really for all of you, and how it affects your work in the ways that it affects your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please.
So I spend a fair bit of my time reading undergraduate writing. And so I'm in a senior seminar right now, I'm in a junior seminar right now, and both of those classes, the students are writing. And over the years, not this semester, but over the years, I have seen, since AI became available, I've seen some just atrocious stuff that it produces. And unfortunately, it is getting harder and harder to recognize. And what it does in terms of destruction is it deprives these students who decide to take that lazy path of the opportunity to do their own writing, receive feedback on that writing, and therefore improve their writing. So that's probably a stereotypical academic's point of view on it. The other piece I do see, though, it has value in terms of some of the grunt work. So if you want to put together a table of contents on a topic, for example, you could very quickly spin that out at AI and have a look at it and go through it and say, wow, there's some value there. And there is. The mistakes that it makes are embarrassing, though. And I've looked at some of those. I asked for some recent work, the most recent work I could find on E.O. Wilson's writings recently. And some of the things it came up with were simply wrong and attributed to the wrong journal and written after he died. which seemed unlikely. So, I get that. That's an academic biologist point of view on it. I definitely see the negative, but I also recognize that people who graduate from our college are definitely going to be using it as a tool moving forward. So you can't ignore the value of the tool. Hopefully we can educate them to the point where they know when it's useful and when it's not. And in terms of pretending to be creative writing and pretending to be art, it's I just find it appalling. That's my point.
Everybody has anything really I don't have anything really wise to say, so I'll let you go first.
Well,
and then I'll
wise.
add.
Yeah, I think that idea of discernment, how do we discern, I think going back to your question too, what is truth? And in an age of AI where these answers can be generated and not be truthful at all, not be based in reality at all. But they're out there. And so then it's up to us to have the discernment, the wherewithal to look at that and say, well, is this true? Is it true to my experience? Does it match up with sources? You can't let AI have the final say. I don't think. We're not. And I hope we don't get there. I don't want it to be that. I don't want to live in a world where answers are just generated and then it becomes like the standardization of thought. And I don't want to be in a world where everybody thinks and does the same way or looks the same way or acts the same way. I mean, outside of being kind to one another, I think we could all do that. But, AI it's hard for me I do try to think of it as a tool. I try to see some positive aspects of it, but I struggle with that. I tend to have a very negative view of it, but I also understand that, even as I'm applying for things and looking for opportunities, often they'll ask you in your application, did you use AI to create any of your work? Or did you use AI to finish this application? And I never do, but I think, but I'm in a world where most people are doing that. And so do I have an advantage or disadvantage? Like, am I sort of shooting myself in the foot, so to speak, by not using this tool? So I have complicated feelings around it. I would like for it to be a tool that we can use, but I also think that environmentally, the impact that it's having, I just don't know that it's worth it. I just don't. The amount of water that it uses, the sound pollution, also affecting, primarily poor Black, brown communities. Like, how is that constructive? That's a big, I don't know, area. So nothing really wise to say in that. I just hope that we continue to use discernment as we develop these types of technologies, because I more easily see the danger than the benefit. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to mention as someone working for the electric department, my concern about is drawing the grid. And while we don't have to be particularly concerned about data centers coming to Vermont anytime soon, the regional, the role that they're playing on the ISO New England grid and how they're driving up electric costs around the country, and just sort of the dichotomy of sort of the good versus the bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaning towards Renee. I don't know if the good, particularly from the electrical grid standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm just going to echo exactly what Renee said. I feel, also very conflicted. I was actually going to say exactly that with drawing a lot of water.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that the last thing that I read, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it said to run the next level of AI, you need the size of like metropolitan, like New York City, to run like that size of data centers, which is crazy. It's insane. But I actually still have hope that if anyone can figure out a way to use it equitably, it's artists. Artists will be able to do it. And I'm not one of them. I'm very manual. So other artists, maybe ones outside of this panel.
Yes, also very analog, obviously. Not using a lot of technology in my pieces as of late, but you still do.
I've been sitting with the title of the show for the better part of the year. And it wasn't until walking in and seeing this photo before this panel started of thinking about the idea of human impact as there's no judgment attached to that. And my assumption in thinking about it has always been the negative of the polluting, the impactful, the negative. And sitting here and listening to this conversation has just opened up that idea that human impact can go in any direction. And so I'm curious, and I'm going to ask maybe the artist to go last on this one, of what do you all take away from this conversation and from this show that is that impact, the importance of creativity that has been brought up tonight, and the importance of dialogue and conversation and community that so much of the art hopes to bring out in all of us?
You want to go?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sure. I just think bringing people together of diverse viewpoints has value. I wasn't sure why I was on this panel, to tell you the truth, except that Brian Collier, my artistic friend, nominated me, I guess, or something like that. So, but I think there's real value to bringing in people of diverse backgrounds, people who are not necessarily active visual artists coming in to think about and look at and learn from visual art. And I've got a kind of a different perspective. My daughter is in art school right now, and I encourage her all the way and support her all the way to do it, because that's what she needs to do in her life. But we need historians in, we need biologists in, we need artists in, we need people from different backgrounds, we need people of color, we need immigrants, and we need everybody to bring their perspective to the table. And this is a room full of folks of different perspectives, and we can all learn from each other. And I think that's the value. And like I said, I'm not a visual artist, but I've learned a lot today, and I'm glad I'm here. So even if I didn't bring value, I'm happy I'm here.
Yeah, I think, Declan nailed it, I think. I'm just always impressed by Doreen, because Doreen is such a, she really values partnership. And I'm thinking more and more over the course of tonight, just the value of the electric department, connecting with our colleagues at BCA to tell this important story, because we both have means of communicating, whether it's data or whether it's something that you can hold in your hand that someone has produced, and the importance of doing that work together.
I agree. I mean,
and
here,
electric department, I just have to say, I love my colleagues. I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but it's almost two sides of the same coin, right? We're trying to share information and move in the right direction. So,
and we're trying to influence each other, right? I mean, this dialogue that we have across the city, across departments, I mean, we're all working for the public good. And if we can't figure out different ways to make our work better and achieve those ends with this close an alliance, like, come on, we have to. So I admire tremendously your work in the community. And I know when you say Doreen, you're saying BCA, because all of the colleagues at BCA are, so engaged in this conversation and the importance of messaging that the arts bring this sometimes difficult conversation to the foreground and make it okay to have that conversation. And I think an exhibition like this, the one that we did more recently on grief, even more so, just really hard stuff that somehow in community, you feel the comfort and the safety of being able to have those conversations. So that's what I appreciate about our colleagues and our throughout the city and coming together and use through the arts, babe, through the arts.
Can I just add a little bit different on the question that was asked? But my three kids went through BCA programs on the way through, and the value was enormous. And one became a film major, and my wife and I are scientists. I'm like, what is he going to do with that? He's working for Channel 5. he's doing fine. You know what I mean? And my other kid is in art school in Chicago. She's loving it. And my eldest was an English major, and she loved what she did, and she's loving it still. So, the BCA has an important influence, and allowing those kids to have the space to explore is valuable.
Thank you. That's so nice to hear.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's the positive human impact. That's the other side of the coin. You can recognize the difficulty in any of those subjects of grief, ecological grief, what's happening with the environmental crisis, and climate catastrophe. And then also we're all here. And that is that's the positive side of it. That's what gives us hope and helps us to move forward.
So thank you, all of you, for a wonderful panel discussion tonight. I'd love a round of applause for. I would be remiss if I didn't take a few moments to thank our underwriters and our sponsors who make this possible. The Mellon Foundation Public Humanities Labs Initiative on Migration through the Axiom Center for the Humanities at Middlebury College. Boy, do they have to figure out how to shorten that. The UVM Office of Research and Economic Development, the Gund Institute for the Environment, UVM School of the Arts, Burlington Electric Department, the Maslow Family Foundation, and our hospitality sponsors, Lake Champlain Chocolates. Can't do without it. And Burlington City Arts is sponsored in part by the Vermont Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. And of course, all of you, because it is your commitment to this community, to this organization, your generosity, the donations that you make to us as individuals keep these programs alive and allow us to do more. So thank you very much. There are envelopes for gifts to BCA on the table. There is an evaluation under your seat. It's really important for us to understand what we do well, how we can be better, how we can create more things together. So let us know your thoughts, and thank you again so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
One last thing, I just want to make sure you know the next public program that we're doing, which is an artist talk with Diane Burko, whose show is downstairs, and that is on April 23rd here at 6 o'clock. So join us.